recording now. And today, as the first day of the lab, as a tradition or based on the lab schedule, is introduction and safety. It's unfortunate that because of the pandemic, you are not able to come to the lab and actually have a hands-on experience. The way we are going to conduct the experiment or the lab this semester, we are going to emphasize more on the data analysis, writing lab reports, and I'm going to be in the lab starting Wednesday. Today, actually, I didn't go to the lab. I'm using my son's room to do this recording or this meeting, and I'm going to perform the experiment and use the camera there to record the experiments as I perform. You are going to record those data with me. It's going to be a lot of questions and answers, pre-lab discussions, and you get points and grades for your participation. So you actually see the experiment live. I will take the attendance because the attendance for the laboratory is mandatory. One missing lab based on the syllabus, it's okay, it's excused, but anything after that is going to be a huge reduction in point, and if it's repeated, 0 definitely for the lab report. The syllabus, just bring up the syllabus to share with you the syllabus today. And from that, if you have any questions, do you see the syllabus screen now? Based on the syllabus, or I don't know how many of you have the the lecture 2210 lecture with me, but I just want to welcome everyone again to my organic chemistry lab. I do enjoy teaching lab and teaching online. I have a great experience in teaching online, but one thing it's new is use of Blackboard Collaborate. So if any problem comes up, I will be able to solve it, but it might stop me for a minute and then I go back because it's new to me. That's the only thing that it's new to me. The prerequisite for this course, 1046 lab, core requisite 2210 lecture. Class time, Mondays, Wednesdays, and alternate Fridays, starting 10 a.m. and it goes to 12:50. It's a distance learning. Labs would be demoed and you will record your data live. My name is Dr. Banush Namari. You have my email address in the syllabus. Please do not use the email address that is on the syllabus unless there is an emergency. I check the D12 email every day, and you can communicate with me. Because it's a distance learning and I have to have a record of the communication, make sure that you have the email and other utilize other communication tools like discussions and the Blackboard Collaborate for the office hours, so it's recorded for your participation and my performance. I get a lot of emails in my Broward email from different places, and when you send me an email from broward.edu, I don't know which class you're talking about, and I'm teaching many labs this summer. So the book that is required, I begged the publisher to prepare the ebook for this summer because of the shipping and other problems that I thought that you might face. And also when it's e-class ebook, it goes much easier, is a better transition. So the ebook is available as a vital source. I just sent an email via D2L. Please click on that after the class, order your ebook. The Other supplements that you do need. I use it's supposed to be lab coat and closed-toed shoes, all that. Because you did not get the kit to perform the experiments and you're not coming to the lab, that's why I have it no need for this semester. Experiments will be demoed to you. You do need a reliable internet connection, and you do have exam that requires responders monitor, and it would be monitored, so you do need to have a webcam for your exam. The webcam and microphone for the proctored exams. What is expected to learn by taking organic chemistry lab this semester? You are going to learn about techniques. And what are those techniques for? We are going to learn about separation technique and identification technique. How do we identify organic compounds? Organic compounds are identified based on their physical property. Let's say you have a compound that freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, boils at 100 degrees Celsius, and has a density of 1 gram per milliliter, and has a refractive index of 0.6324. The only compound that corresponds to that is water. So it's going to be the same for others. Let's say you have benzoic acid. Benzoic acid is a white powder and is going to melt at 123 degrees Celsius. What happens if your benzoic acid is contaminated? You haven't used benzoic acid, so you may not be able to answer this question. But if you have water and you add salt to it, salt water is going to boil at higher temperature, right? It freezes at lower temperature. So salt, it counts as contamination for the water. So because it's contamination, the physical property is going to be altered. So physical property is going to change. Now that benzoic acid, if it's contaminated with urea, if it's contaminated with something else, is going to now show a different melting point. If instead of melting at 123, about 123 or 122 to 23 with a sharp melting, now it's going to start melting at 90 degrees Celsius. It starts melting at 90 degrees Celsius and then it goes up to like 105 degrees Celsius and for complete melting. Instead of 2 degree sharp range of melting, now you are going to have a 15 degree broad range of melting. The initial melting started at 95 instead of 120 or 21 or 22. What does it mean? It means your compound is contaminated. Now, if your compound is contaminated, what are you going to do? Are you going to give up? No, you are organic chemistry 1 lab student now. You're not 1045 lab students anymore. So you have to look for the solution. You have to purify your compound. Because if your compound is not pure, you cannot identify it. In order to purify a compound, you are going to learn about the techniques for purification, for separation. First experiment is just physical property. That's next experiment is measuring boiling point, melting point, solubility, and that is to show you techniques how to measure the physical property. Why physical property? Because physical properties are important in order to identify the compound. If you don't have physical property, you cannot identify your compound. If your compound is not pure, you cannot get proper numbers for the physical properties. So after first lab, we are going to start with separation technique. We use distillation. Distillation is to purify liquid. To purify liquid, 2 liquids that they have closer boiling points, we would use fractional distillation. If they have far apart boiling point of difference of 80 degrees, we can use like simple distillation. We can use recrystallization to purify a solid compound, organic solid compound. We can use extraction. Extraction, it could be solid liquid extraction, liquid extractions. It can be purified, used to purify either liquid or solid organic compounds. We are going to learn about steam distillation. The steam distillation is used to purify high boiling point compounds that if you use simple distillation, you will decompose and destroy your compound. So you would use steam distillation. You are going to learn about all these techniques, which is for separation. Second half of the semester, you are going to learn about chemical reactions that corresponds to the chapter. For chapter 5, you're talking about the stereochemistry, so you would do experiments in the lab that corresponds to chapter 5. Chapter 6, alkyl halides, so we talk about preparation of alkyl halides, elimination reaction, SN1, SN2 reaction. So it corresponds to the lecture. So these are like behavior competencies, or what you are expected to learn while you are you are taking this lab. The pre-lab exercises, your pre-lab exercises, they are going to be as a quiz for pre-lab. So you are going to take the 10 quizzes, your 10 pre-lab exercises, 6 points each, and that adds up to 60 points that you have for your pre-lab. That's indicated in your syllabus. Attendance is mandatory for the lab, even though it's online, even though it's distance learning, still is mandatory. You cannot watch the recording and say, well, I watched the recording, because we are going to, right now I'm sharing the full screen, and I cannot see your questions right now, but it's going to be like more of a discussion, question and answer. Starting next class is a video, is not document, so we are going to talk to each other more, and that participation and understanding the experiment is very important, so it has to be live. Punctuality, you're expected to attend the lab session on time, and then some days we finish the lab early, other days we finish the lab late, but it should not be later than the ending lab time. Safety is very important. If you are in the lab, I'm going to be in the lab, I have to be very careful with my safety and people who work in the lab, their safety. Safety goggles is a must. Gloves is highly recommended, is a must. Lab coat is a must. And following safety rules that you learned in general chemistry is a must. For the grading policy, you have your lab reports. 100 points this is assigned of the final grade is going to come from your lab reports. The pre-lab assignment, as I said, 60 points. A lab notebook is 30 points. Final exam and 50 points. Final exam, we talk about final exam 1 week before the exam as a review and more, but to make sure you understand what to pay attention, the final exam questions is going to come from pre-lab discussion. So when you take the final exam, you probably have seen those questions already in your pre-lab quiz, or you have heard from me during the pre-lab discussions. Withdrawal and audit, that is a choice of the students. If you're not attending class, or you're not happy with the grade that you have, up to the point at the last day of the withdrawal, you can withdraw or audit. Audit is used for students who want to withdraw from co-requisite, and they cannot keep one of the co-requisite. Instead of withdraw, you can audit and stay with the other class. A lab, organic lab especially, is demanding. because it's time consuming, but it's the most rewarding experience that you will have, because it gives you understanding of what you learned in theory, and being able to analyze data. You are going to learn a lot about the bookkeeping, not much about housekeeping unless you are a good observer and you just watch me performing the experiments, keeping my work clean. Try to avoid any contamination, because we already talked about contamination is going to alter the physical properties. For communication, use the communication tool in D2L. Make sure you send email using D2L email. You post question in the Modius Point or Student Cafe discussion board, and if it's not published to you, I will make sure it's published, so you do have a place to ask questions from your group members. You ask questions from me in the discussion board, so it's not just email. Maybe that question is someone else's question, and if it's someone else's question, then everybody that they didn't ask, so at least they could read the answer, and it's going to help the whole class. I will make sure to answer your question within 24 to 36 hours. If it's an email, if it's a discussion, it does not matter. You will get a response from me. The accommodation, students who require accommodation, you send me an email. You do have the phone number of the different campuses that you can call and look for accommodation. Classroom atmosphere, some of these apply to real life class, and some applies to the to the Blackboard or distance learning via Blackboard Collaborate. But in general, the general rule for safety, students must have protective clothing. Anyone working in the lab must have protective clothing. That is closed-toed shoes, lab coat, safety glasses. Eating and drinking is not allowed in the lab because of the safety, because you don't want to ingest any chemicals. If there is any accidents, you must report directly right away to your instructor. You should not work unsupervised in the lab when it's a teaching lab. It's a research lab, is different, but different question. But for a teaching lab, you should not work unsupervised. The lab reports, originality is checked for the lab reports. That means your lab report is going to be compared to anything that is online, including any classmates' lab report, and the originality, which is done by the Turnitin originality check. It weighs very high for your grade, so you want to make sure that you have your original work. So when you write a lab report, you have to paraphrase anything from the lab manual, because the lab manual is online. If you are writing anything from even the procedure, you want to make sure to paraphrase it, and you want to make sure that you write in your own word, and that helps you with understanding, because now you're trying to write in simple and your own word, and it also prevents from the plagiarism. Okay, I have two documents here: how to prepare organic chemistry lab notebook. What goes to the lab notebook is you have the documents in 3 different places. Your lab manual contains this, your syllabus has, and as a standing alone separate document also, it shows how to prepare a lab notebook. In your lab notebook, you should have the table of content and experiment, title for the experiment, material you are using for the lab notebook, and table for data, what you are going to record. A procedure for the experiment, how to perform that experiment, step by step in your own word. Step 1, for example, assemble hot water bath. Step 2, at chemical number 1, step 3 at 3 milliliters exactly of the chemical number 3 or 2, and heat up for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So it's a protocol, it's like a cookbook. Your lab notebook should be numbered. So you take a composition book, which is the cheapest one. I don't need a fancy $20 lab notebook, but a composition book. It needs to be used, and pages needs to be numbered. That's for the lab notebook. I'm sorry, I don't see your questions. If you have posted any questions via chat, I'm going to go finish the lab report and then close this document. When I close this document, then I go to answer your questions, and I see your questions, and then we will talk about the lab schedule and answer your questions about this. The lab report. So you are going to prepare your lab notebook prior to beginning of the experiment. So 10 a.m. of Wednesday, you should have the procedure and the title procedure for your experiment 1 with the table for data that the experiment is going to be recorded in the lab, the data from the lab directly via the Blackboard Collaborate, and you record that in your lab notebook. How are you going to share that with me? You are going to take a picture and upload to a lab notebook assignment folder. I have to create that because I was going to ask you, and I will ask you again, if you want to type this or write it in the lab notebook. Lab notebook is the guideline from the ACS. So I'm not coming up with these rules. If it's too much, too little, or too detailed, is not my choice. These are the recommendation or the guideline from American Chemical Society, how the lab notebook needs to be prepared, how the lab report needs to be prepared. I might change slightly to make it easier for my students, like one side and then make emphasis on the other. So I'm not making too many changes to these guidelines from the ACS. And the lab notebook needs to be prepared before you start the experiment. Lab report is different. Lab report is a formal lab report. It needs to be typed up. It's a Word document, and you can upload as a Word or PDF into the lab report folder that you have under assignment, and I have a folder separately for each one of them. The component of the lab report, title page. The first page or the top of the first page is going to be the title for the experiment, is going to be your name, your lab partner's name, which you don't have at this point, professor's name, and then the date that experiment was performed. Abstract is the summary of the experiment, including the major data value. So you want to include those numbers in there. For example, what was the melting point for the compound A? What was the melting point for the unknown? What's the percent yield? Those numbers needs to be included in the abstract. The numbers that are helping you to identify the compound or defend the hypothesis, the purpose of the experiment, satisfy the purpose of the experiment. Why did you actually do this experiment? And what numbers did you obtain to back up the purpose? Introduction. You can use the lab manual and summarize the theory that is in the lab manual for the introduction part. Material and method. Since materials and methods are already in your lab notebook, you don't have to include here. Result, it must be tabulated. So even if it's like 2 number, you must draw a table, and with the table you are going to use include the numbers in a table. The table must have a title. Discussion. It's the step-by-step, basically summary of your experimental finding, and you want to explain what is happening at the molecular level to your compound, like any conditions that you have controlled. You will learn about that in the experiment during the pre-lab discussions. Also, I emphasize a lot of that. For example, if you are measuring melting point, the heating rate must be slow. It cannot be like very high because the thermometer cannot record the temperature fast. So the thermometer temperature is going to be lagging the oven temperature. That explanation, it goes to discussion. Why do you have to control the heating rate? And other examples that is specific to the experiment, and you learn about them in the pre-lab discussions, and also is explained in the lab manual, why and how, why you are doing this and what is happening. So you want to elaborate on the reasons why you were or were not using any of the controlled condition or the hypothesis, or if there is a deviation in the data from what is expected, then you can explain that in discussions. Maybe this happened and what are that. Conclusion, summary of the finding. The difference between the conclusion and the abstract is that in conclusion, you have to explain what are the sources of error, and you have to suggest for improvement. So if you were doing this experiment again for a second time, what would you not do? If you were teaching someone else, you are going to say why you should do this and why should you not, what you should not do in order to get better result of the experiment. So you are emphasizing on sources of error, and you are suggesting for improvements, what you do to get better data next time. Bibliography, there should be at least one, and please use the APA format or any acceptable format for the references. Just giving like I use the lab manual, it cannot be a bibliography, because we are practicing learning how to write formal lab report. The originality is going to be checked. So I have this in a couple places. I do have a sample conclusion here. So I want you to read the sample conclusion before you write your own. I have a sample lab report in D2L is posted for you. So after you finish this experiment, this lab, you are going to learn about the separation technique, identification technique. You are going to learn about two very good techniques that is going to help you to survive your life and your going to stop sharing this so I can go back to the. Let me see if you have any questions. Do you have any questions for me? I will continue. The lab reports due dates are dated for fall semester. I did. Okay. I did change them all. And maybe it didn't save, just like the other part that it didn't go through and it's not published. Sure, I will change those. Definitely the dates will be changed. So you're welcome. Do you have any other questions for me? Okay, for this, yes, there are a couple questions. Let me answer those questions and then we continue. Okay, the lab notebooks. The only thing we can do based on the available, technology that we have, a picture of each experiment that it goes to the lab notebook. You are going to, let's say the first experiment is going to take like 3 pages from your lab notebook. You just You are going to take a picture of that, take an image, and upload to the lab notebook folder for each experiment. At the end of the semester, I will not be able to collect it, but I'm going to grade based on the submissions that you have for each experiment. The lab report dates, I will fix those. You're welcome. When are the lab reports typically due? Typically, it's due the week after, just like 10 o'clock, beginning of second experiment, the lab report should be due for the first experiment. But because it's summer and sometimes you have like 3 experiments in 1 week, I'm not going to make the lab reports due, the lab that you're performing on Monday due on Wednesday, or the Wednesday due on Friday. So I'm going to, for summer class only, I'm going to make everything due Sunday night. Is that okay, Alex? And everybody who's in class, is that okay? If I make everything, that all the lab reports for each week on Sunday night, 11:30 p.m. Perfect. Perfect. MLA is fine. Any acceptable reference writing, it's fine. MLA is perfect. So that is great. Any other questions you might have for me? No? Okay. The 2 major aspects of a chemistry lab, which I told you that is, even though it's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding, is that one is a good bookkeeping. The other one is good housekeeping. A good bookkeeping, we are going to practice that and emphasize more. And what are the benefits? In a lab, so if you're working in a chemistry lab, in a crime lab, or anywhere that you do experiment that is dealing with sample, you have to keep chain of custody. So if you are working in a crime lab, if they bring the sample, you have to record everything from the moment you get that sample until the result is produced and is left your lab and your hand. Because if anything goes wrong, then you'll be responsible for, if the company that you're working for, they are questioned, and then they come to you. When they come to you, they are going to ask for your record. If you have your record, everything is clearly recorded and documented, you'll be fine. If not, the company is going to lose the lawsuit. You will be fired. You will be replaced by someone who can do bookkeeping properly. I'm sure some of you have been, you know someone who works in doctor's office, or you have experience working, you have volunteered in doctor's office. What is their main concern? Are you allowed to leave the office before you record everything from the patient? Because what happens if the patient leaves the office and something happens at before the next day? And if you don't have the record of what happened to the patient, what was the treatment, or what exact data, what was the diagnosis, and the suggestions or prescriptions and all that, insurance is going to have problem. If anything happens to the patient, then that office is going to be reliable, and big problems for that. So bookkeeping is very important in real life. So you must have good bookkeeping techniques, and you will practice with this lab. Housekeeping, you have to be very clean in the lab. What I mean by that is you have to avoid contamination. You cannot contaminate your sample, because if you contaminate your sample, you are going to alter the result of the experiment. Salt water has different boiling point compared to pure water. A benzoic acid that has contamination of urea, of naphthalene, or something else is not going to melt at 122 to 123 degrees Celsius. And you're using that data in order to identify your compound. So to identify the compound, you have to depend on the physical property. Physical property of contaminated compound is different So you cannot contaminate your chemicals. You cannot contaminate your workstation and put your hand over that workstation and touch the chemicals and then touch your face. Your chemicals cannot be, your skin cannot be exposed to chemicals. You cannot touch them because most of them are corrosive, most chemicals. Unless you know for sure and it's been recorded that is not dangerous, they could be carcinogen, they can cause different diseases. So you cannot touch those chemicals. You cannot inhale too much, like a high volume or vapor of the organic chemicals because they have health risks associated with them. So you have to work in fume hood. You have to be clean. You have to make sure that your chemicals are sealed all the time, especially organic compounds, because they evaporate. Even if it's liquid, they evaporate. If it's solid, they can sublime. They have lower melting point and boiling point compared to inorganic compounds. We talked about the organic compounds being compounds of carbon. We slightly talked about in lecture about intermolecular forces. Intermolecular forces for organic compounds are weak. That means that they can boil and melt at lower temperature. So it has to be covered, like nail polish remover or acetone, which is often just used as a pure acetone, and other times it says non-acetone, and then the ingredient it says acetone. Anyway, you see how fast it dries up because it has very low boiling point, because it has very weak intermolecular forces. If you have a container that is open in the lab, and you are working there, you would get high volume of that and is dangerous. And any chemical, organic chemical at a high concentration, it can cause health problems. So you have to keep your workstation clean, and you have to be very, very organized. And if you are organized, you know the benefits of that, then your roommate is going to like you more. So in real life, your employer is going to like you more because you are organized. Your loved one is going to like you more because organized and clean. You're not making mess. You're not expecting someone else to clean up your mess. That's a good, character of being a good roommate and a partner. So your children in the future is going to look up to you and learn from you. So there are a lot of benefits for housekeeping. It doesn't stop just in the lab and getting good data. It has nice other benefits too. So those are the two major aspects of the lab: good bookkeeping, good housekeeping. Data analysis is going to be emphasized because it's online nature of this lab. So in your lab report, you're going to show understanding what was the purpose of the experiment, and did you achieve that? And any experiment is going to have some experimental error. So don't think that if I'm doing the experiment, it's going to be zero experimental error. You will have some experimental error either by nature or on purpose. You will have some experimental error, so you have to find the sources of error, and you have to look for suggestions for improvements. Do you have any questions? Anything that posted on D2L for Organic One Lab? And do you have any questions for me? Okay, there was a problem with the connection, so I had to reload. Can you tell me, please, if you can hear me? Yes, thank you. Thank you. Do you have any questions for me? Any questions about the grading policy? Is there anything you like or you dislike that I can change for the other semester? Okay. I am sorry that I missed some students today, but I am sure they are going to watch this recording and they know that attendance is mandatory. We don't want to get a grade of 0 for the for non-attending, especially that now that is so convenient. For Wednesday lab, yes, you do need a lab notebook ready for experiment 1 with the first experiment, title for the experiment. So the first 2 pages you leave for the table of data. And then on the second page, you start with your experiment 1. You write the title for experiment, and you write the procedure for the experiment, material you need for the experiment, and you are going to create a small table based on the data you are going to record. And that would be your lab notebook ready for Wednesday. The first time, especially the first experiment, it has like a higher number of data for solubility especially. And after that, those number of the data values is just limited to 2-3 numbers. So it's a good practice, but it gets easier. You get used to it, and this gets easier also. By 10 o'clock in the morning, please, yes, I want you to turn in the pictures of the notebook before 10 a.m. on Wednesday. This way, I make sure that you have read the experiments and you have the procedure written down, so you can tell me if I'm doing anything right or wrong in terms of doing the experiment on Wednesday. You're welcome. Any other questions you might have? No? What about the overall quality of the Blackboard Collaborate? Do you have any problems with it? Is there something we can improve? Because this is my first time using the Blackboard Collaborate. No? Is it okay? It's okay? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your response. If you have the ebook, so do I screenshot the picture? What do you mean is screenshot the pictures? The picture, is this for the lab notebook? Janica, if it's for the lab notebook, you have to have a composition book. With the composition book, you are going to write in your own words. It's like a handwritten document that you're taking picture. Because I already have the ebook and I know those writings, so please just keep in mind your lab notebook is a handwritten document and you are using composition book. And you take a picture of the first few pages of the composition book, or not the first few pages. Sorry, take it back. The pages that you have that experiment. let's say for your experiment 1, you have your page 1, page 2, and page 3. So you take picture of those 3 pages and you upload to the Dropbox that you have for lab notebook for experiment 1. I know you got the answer, Donica, earlier. I just want to emphasize and make sure everyone gets it, how we are going to do this, because it's new. But the good thing is that it's at least working. Any other questions you might have for me? No? As I promised, today's lab is going to be a short lab, and I'm just answering your question at this point because it's just the introduction and safety. How we are going to work during the semester. Have you looked at the lab schedule so you know which Fridays you do have experiment, which ones you don't? I do have the schedule uploaded into D2L, so there is a folder for just the lab schedule. Make sure that you work with that. If there is any change to the lab schedule, I will send the new lab schedule or update and send you an email. But for now, we are working with that lab schedule. The syllabus has 2 important documents other than the rules for how to calculate your grade and how would you earn your grade and all that. One is how to prepare lab notebook, and one is how to prepare a lab report. They sound similar, but they are 2 different things. Lab notebook is a handwritten document in a composition book. Lab report is a formal document. It needs to be typed up, and usually is like 3 to 5 pages report for the experiment. That includes the theory, introduction, abstract, title, and discussion. Discussion should be the main part of the lab report. Introduction is the summary of the introduction from the lab notebook. I do have videos in the posted. They are not using exact equipments that we are using in our lab, and they might present you with data at the end. Here is the data. Those are not the data that I want you to use for your lab report. The experiments that I will perform in the lab, those are the experiments that you are using the data for, because that goes with your lab manual. Those videos are for you to have it as a record, so you can watch it to learn more about the techniques, and if there's any explanation that it helps you to write better discussions or have a better understanding. They sound different. They are good and very reliable experiments as well. Temporarily, we have access to those. Unfortunately, it's not permanent, and the access is for because of the pandemic, and we don't know how long we will have access to those, but until we have it, I have it available for you. It's not going to last too long. So we are going to depend on the experiments that we are doing in the lab, and those data is required for your experiments. Any questions for me? No? Okay. I am done with the introduction, and it was nice meeting you all via the chat room, and I hope that you have a great day. And if I didn't scare you enough, I will see you on Wednesday 10 a.m. for the lab, and for those of you who have lecture with me, see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'm sorry, 8 a.m. Have a great day. Thank you all. I am going to stay a few minutes longer because I have some students who might have received the email right now and they might join. But if you have questions while I'm still live, you can ask me questions. If you're taking lecture with me, you could ask me questions during the lab as well, when we have time, like now. We start 10 a.m. For the lab, 8 a.m. for the lecture. Yes, today I started at 10. The email that went out had a, I think it says 11, and then I corrected to 10. The lab starts at 10, so we started at 10 today. Well, like 9:59, 10 o'clock we started. Did they answer your question? Charlene? Okay. I'm sorry. I am sorry. Okay, I do mark you, Charlene, for the mark you present today for the because of the discrepancy, because the first email that went out by mistake, it was at 11 o'clock, and then I changed it to 10 because your class starts at 10. Please watch the video, and if you have any questions, you can ask me. Make sure to ask me before Wednesday or Wednesday, and just make sure that we have everything clear for the next lab. You know what is required for the lab. The recorded session is going to be available, I believe, at 12:50, because the session has to end before the recording is available. Caitlin, for the co-op groups, do we have to send the form, or can we just send the name? As long as the information that is on the form is in your email or in the folder, it's fine. That's all I need, just to make sure that I have your name, because the form also, it just gives the name. Ask for the name, if that answers your question. For the notebook, the procedure have to be in our, yes. The procedure needs to be your own words, yes. Simple, your own words. Any other questions? No? Okay.